this past weekend, The Little Mermaid, which is the latest in a long line of Disney's live-action remakes released in theaters. So it's time to rank all 22 Disney live-action remakes from the worst to the best. Yes, at this point, there are 22 of them. Number 22, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. This movie tries to be a course correction of the first film, which took a villain who was evil just for the fun of it and made her a sympathetic villain. The idea got a lot of backlash, so this sequel tries to fix that, but yet it still suffers from many of the same problems. The film is also very convoluted with a plot about these kingdoms who are at war, and it's surprisingly dark given its PG rating, and it feels like it's trying to be PG-13, but it holds back just enough, so as a result, the film feels very choppy. Michelle Pfeiffer is great in this movie as the villain, but its story is just a mess. Number 21, Maleficent. Like I've already said, it's a movie that takes the character who is one of Disney's most despicable villains and instead gives her a backstory that tries to make you feel sorry for her instead of serving as a cautionary tale about revenge, and instead makes her the victim. I don't know what they were thinking or why they thought this was a good idea. Number 20, Pete's Dragon, a film that has absolutely none of the magic or whimsy of the original. Instead of being this fun story about a boy who finds a dragon and becomes friends with him to escape his abusive family, we instead get a movie that's very somber, very serious in tone, and very preachy about forest preservation, because that's what Pete's Dragon needed, apparently. The villain's motivations are also not that clear. He wants the dragon for some reason. I mean, at least in the original, there's an entire musical number about how they're going to chop up the dragon and sell the various parts as tonics, but this one's just like, he wants the dragon for the sake of giving the movie a villain, I guess. The kid who plays Pete also doesn't come off as like this natural kid. He comes off as overly cutesy. It doesn't feel like a real kid. He feels like he's being very directed, and I don't know, it just wasn't very good. Number 19, The Lion King, a movie that has absolutely no reason to exist. Some of the remakes, I can kind of see what the mindset behind the justification was. Some of these are remakes of films that have certain elements in them that haven't aged well for today's sensibilities, or maybe by today's standards, the pacing is a bit slower for today's audiences. But Lion King has neither of those problems. This feels more like director Jon Favreau wanted to do what Robert Zemeckis did with his Polar Express movie, where he was more focused on showing off filmmaking technology rather than trying to make an actual movie. The movie is over 2 hours long, and that's mostly because shots in the original that are only about 10 seconds are instead dragged out in this version to almost a full minute, or sometimes longer. And the disadvantage of the film also looking realistic is that the emotions of the characters cannot be fully expressed, so as a result, we don't resonate with them or feel the emotion we're supposed to feel. It looks visually stunning, but there's no reason for this movie to exist. Number 18, Alice in Wonderland. In theory, Tim Burton should be the perfect director for this, but when it comes to the execution, he completely botched it. Instead of the quirkiness of the original, we instead get this cliched Chosen One prophecy story that has a very dark tone and a main actress who delivers very boring performance. Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter, they give really fun performances as the Mad Hatter and the Red Queen, but that's about it. Number 17, Dumbo, another Tim Burton-directed Disney remake that also feels very lacking. The execution here feels very inconsistent. It feels like Tim Burton wanted to do this fresh new version of the story, but Disney wanted to play it safe, and they tried to find this happy medium, but it failed. This doesn't really feel like a Tim Burton movie with his unique creative vision. It feels very safe and dull. And even he has gone on record to say, I will never work with Disney again because they screwed up my vision for this movie. And you can tell. You can really, really tell. Number 16, The Lady and the Tramp, a movie that just exists. Doesn't do really anything with the story that's different. It feels very safe. It recreates all the iconic scenes from the original, but it doesn't really do anything to expand on the ideas or try to justify its existence. It's so much like the original, you might as well just watch the original. Number 15, Peter Pan and Wendy, which I think is a very mixed film. I think it gets more hate than it deserves, but I do have a few issues with it. Now, Jude Law, he's fantastic as Captain Hook, and the film has its fun moments, but overall there are still a few issues. The biggest one being the movie looks very drab. Neverland is supposed to be a vibrant landscape of wonder, but this film has very muted colors that frankly make the film very boring to look at. The film also seems to forget the point of Wendy being there, as there are girls in the Lost Boys. Also, Wendy is brought there because the Lost Boys want that female influence, so when you put girls in the Lost Boys, it completely negates the reason for Wendy being brought to Neverland in the first place. The film is also very odd in tone, as it comes off more like a Pirates of the Caribbean movie at times, again mixed with a little bit of Maleficent. And, like Maleficent, we of course have the problem of the film trying to make Captain Hook a sympathetic villain. Now, I admire the film did at least try something different with the story, rather than just being the straight-up shot-for-shot remake, or making it so different that it's hard to even recognize that it's the same story. But I thought the film, while it was very watchable, still could have been vastly improved. Number 14, Mulan. I honestly don't think this movie is that bad. I have a few issues with it. Mainly, the main actress, very miscast. She gives a very wooden performance, and the villain isn't the best written. The logic of why this evil witch serves this emperor and just kind of serves something that she doesn't like, even though she's far more powerful than he is, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Mulan's got a sister for some reason, and she doesn't do anything in this movie, and you actually forget that she exists in this movie. But it has a lot of very exciting war sequences in this film. It is very well shot. It has a lot of really great action choreography. While the characters and story, they're kind of lacking, I at least appreciate that it's a different take, and there are some fun action scenes in this. Number 13, 101 Dalmatians. Even though this movie is just kind of okay, it's still entertaining enough. This is directed by John Hughes, who directed the first two Home Alone movies, and that's basically what this is. Home Alone, but with puppies. The dogs don't talk in this version, thank goodness, because that would just be weird. Glenn Close gives a delightful performance as Cruella de Vil, as well as Hugh Laurie and Mark Williams delivering fun performances as her henchmen. It's got some fun slapstick humor, and it's a delight. Number 12, 102 Dalmatians. I do think on a story level this one is a lot stronger than the predecessor. The idea of Cruella de Vil being rehabilitated and trying to make up for what she did and then going crazy again and getting revenge on the puppies of the dogs that defeated her, fun idea. And you got Eric Idle as a parrot who thinks he's a dog. He's really funny. The character of Oddball who goes through these insane ways to try and get her spots. And Gerard Depardieu as her new henchman Lapelt. They also provide a lot of laughs to this movie as well. Number 11, Alice Through the Looking Glass. A vast improvement over the 2010 version. But it still has a few problems. For one, Alice is still a very bland and wooden character. She doesn't really feel like she has that sense of curiosity or wonder that Alice is supposed to have. But at least from a story perspective, this one, at least tone-wise, feels a bit more like an Alice in Wonderland story because it personifies abstract ideas, mainly the idea of time. The writing also is a lot of fun with its many jokes and puns about time, and the ideas about time travel and its consequences. It is a lot more fun and feels more in line with what it's supposed to be. It's just that Alice is very miscast. Number 10, Beauty and the Beast. Again, biggest problem, miscasting. Emma Watson, probably not the best choice for Belle. I think they just looked at, okay, Beauty and the Beast came out around the same time as Harry Potter. There's a little bit of an overlap with the generation that grew up with these. Let's just kind of combine the two. Let's try and combine the nostalgia of Harry Potter and Beauty and the Beast, and we'll get Emma Watson to play Belle, even though she's not really the best choice for the role. Visually, though, the movie is marvelous. Now, some of the characters don't translate very well to live action, mainly the candle, the teapot, they look very weird. It feels like it fixes a lot of the plot holes of the original. Like, why was the prince, who was simply this 10-year-old child obeying stranger danger rules, why was he so cruelly cursed for that? The songs are also fantastic to watch, and they feel very much in line with the animated version, and they add a few new songs that also expand with the story. There are a few issues with it, but I still think it is one of the better remakes. Number 9, Pinocchio, which I get as a hot take because it seems everybody but me despises this movie. I thought it was fun. Robert Zemeckis makes it enough like the original, but he also puts his own spin on it as well. It's like what he did with Christmas Carol. While it is more or less a shot-for-shot remake of the original, Zemeckis also adds enough extra elements that make it feel fresh in its own film. The Coachman, for example, he's given a pretty catchy villain song, and there's some new characters that make the film feel like it's not a complete retread. Zemeckis' vision of Pleasure Island, it's very creative, as is his design for Monster of the Whale, which is vastly different from the original, and he actually looks a lot scarier. A couple issues from which the film suffers is that the Blue Fairy, her design is somewhat unsettling. The actress does a wonderful job, but she's barely in the movie, and so she feels like she's not even really necessary to the plot other than just exposition, because she only shows up in the first scene and then never again. The film also makes a point to show the villainous Stromboli being brought to justice for his crimes, but it seems like Honest John the Fox and his cat accomplice and the Coachman, they all get away scot-free, so why show one villain suffering consequences when none of the other ones do? The film also, despite a few issues of its own, though, it is just as magical and exciting and scary as the original, even though they did change the ending up a bit. Pinocchio doesn't become a real boy, which is a little frustrating, but I think as far as these remakes go, I think Walt Disney would at least be somewhat proud of his new vision, and that's no lie. Number 8, The Jungle Book. This is probably the movie with the best cast. Bill Murray as Baloo, Idris Elba as Shere Khan, Scarlett Johansson as Kaa. The CGI in this movie is groundbreaking, and though the story is a bit heavy-handed with its message about humans and destroying the environment and don't mess with fire, I still think it is a very well-made film. It's at least better than Jon Favreau's version of Lion King. Number 7, Christopher Robin, a wonderful little film that does basically the same thing as Hook. It's very heartwarming. This is definitely geared more towards adults who grew up with Winnie the Pooh, and is a wonderful reminder of the value of taking time out of your day to just have fun. Just because you become an adult doesn't mean you have to become stuffy all the time. It also has a wonderful message about not letting your work life make you neglect your family. The CGI on Pooh and the other characters is fantastic. Jim Cummings returns to the iconic role of Winnie the Pooh. He gives a very sweet, innocent performance, and it gives the movie a lot of heart. This is a film that will take you back to a simpler time in your life and perhaps teach you a few life lessons as well. Number 6, The Little Mermaid. This movie managed to find a pretty good balance between doing it differently enough that its existence feels justified, but was also careful enough to keep the same spirit and tone as the original. Most of the performances are fantastic. Halle Bailey as Ariel, she absolutely shines in the spotlight, especially because, as far as I know, this is her first big movie role, and she absolutely nailed it. Melissa McCarthy disappears into the role of Ursula. I was pleasantly surprised by how good her performance was. When they announced she was playing Ursula, I went, I don't know about that. I don't really like her in anything. But no, she really managed to just absolutely disappear into the role. I didn't see Melissa McCarthy in this movie. I saw Ursula. She became a character, not an actress. She was fantastic. There are a few clunkier performances, mainly from Sebastian and Triton, but even then, they're not horrible. They're just sort of awkward at times. Visually, it is also a very gorgeous film. And some of the new takes on the songs, I think they were done better in the original, and there are a couple of new songs added that I feel were unneeded, and they just kind of padded the runtime. But the film fleshes out the relationship between Eric and Ariel and makes it more believable. There are a few issues with some of the way the story is structured, but overall, I think this is a remake that swam instead of sank. Number 5, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. In my opinion, this is a remake by technicality only, but when you look up a list of Disney remakes, this is on the list, even though I don't really think it should be on there, because the only thing that makes this qualify as a remake is one scene that recreates the Fantasia short that this is based on. Other than that, this is pretty much its own thing, but it is all the better for it. While the performances by Nicolas Cage and Dave Baruchel can be very mixed, this film has a lot of creativity, excitement, and a pretty fun story. Number 4, Cinderella. Kenneth Branagh's take on the classic fairy tale is absolutely gorgeous. Cinderella and the prince get a lot more character development. Kate Blanchett delivers a fantastic performance as the stepmother, and it also has a great message for the audience. Number 3, Cruella. Out of all the movies on this list, this is definitely the most daring and feels the least like a Disney movie, and that's a good thing. It isn't afraid to go to some very dark places and provide commentary on things like mental illness and nature versus nurture. Instead of doing what Maleficent did, where they tried to make the villain sympathetic, this film instead serves as a cautionary tale about revenge. It's also very well stylized, feeling like a cross between Ocean's 11 and Batman Returns, which helps it stand out from all the other live-action adaptations. Number 2, Aladdin. This keeps the spirit and tone of the original while also greatly expanding upon it. Jasmine feels more like an actual character rather than just a plot device or goal for Aladdin. Will Smith brings his own spin of charisma and humor to the genie. The film is gorgeous. It's got dance numbers that feel straight out of a Bollywood film. Really, my only complaint about this movie is the casting of Jafar, because Jafar is not sinister enough. I still think this is one of the best live-action remakes on the list, though. It's fantastic. And number 1 is Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. This is like all the humor of the Lego movies, but leaning a bit more towards satire and parody. The jokes in this movie about Hollywood selling out, washed-up actors, meta-humor, just things that kids won't get because they're not in on the joke. This is the kind of movie you should watch twice. Once for the plot and the dialogue, and the second time so you can pause to get all the background jokes and cameos, because there are so many. In terms of plot, it does have a few similarities to Roger Rabbit. This idea that cartoons are actors, and there's a villain coming after them, and they're trying to figure out what this conspiracy is, but it's also widely different and stands out as its own thing. And you don't need to watch the show and understand the movie, but you'll definitely appreciate it more. But you can still go into this not having seen a single episode and still get a kick out of it. It's very much a love letter to animation. It's a love letter to 90s kids who grew up with the original show, and it's great for the whole family. Everyone, regardless of their age, can get a kick out of it. It's absolutely hilarious, and it comes in at number 1. You can share your ranking of the new live-action remakes, including Little Mermaid, and I will see you next time.